Hello, my name is Katie, and welcome to the SOLITA podcast, Notes on Tears and Chaos. For this episode, I have to hold on to the microphone the whole time because my setup is currently very janky. I am back home for the holidays, even though this episode will be released after the holidays. But yeah, I don't have a lot working with me right now. It's taking forever to figure out what angle I want to do because I also don't have my lamp to light my face and everything, and it's just a mess overall. So this is what we're working with right now. But today's episode, I wanted to talk about working and jobs, which is probably something that everybody can relate to in their own little special way. But the reason why I wanted to talk about that for today's episode was because I wanted to talk about it while I'm in the current state that I'm in my life, which is unemployed. I have been unemployed since May through July. Technically my last day of work was in May, but I actually quit in July, and it's been an experience. So where I used to work was this elementary school. I used to be an aftercare counselor, and that was absolute chaos. I love kids and I wanted to work with them for a while, and a lot of people told me, don't do it. You can't do it. Kids are insane. And I was like, that's just because you don't like kids, or kids don't even like you. I get along with kids pretty well, so I think I can do it. Oh my gosh. I don't know if it's this generation or if this is how it was always, especially when I was in school, elementary school, but kids are insane. They are so hyperactive. I don't know if it's the iPad generation, but I honestly was losing my head every single day. I hated it. And so I quit. I stayed for the school year. They offered a bonus to anybody that stayed because apparently a lot of people don't like this job. It was a lot. It was a handful, and I hated going into work every day. But I made it through. I got my bonus and I was out of there. And I thought that I was going to find a new job after that. I didn't think it was going to be so hard to find a job. Just any job that would pay me good enough and wouldn't be super demanding. But in the fall semester, I got an internship, and it was an unpaid internship. And I thought this was a good thing for my career, to have on my resume, like an internship, and maybe I can make connections and everything. But I was still job searching because it was an unpaid internship, and I'd never had one before, so I didn't really know how it worked. I didn't know when I was supposed to clock in and clock out. I don't know what I was supposed to do, but I was still job searching, and that process was very, very brutal. It was a lot. I never really struggled that much with job searching, but because the internship was taking up 4 hours of my day for 3 days a week, I had terrible availability on top of going to my classes. And people close pretty early nowadays. Stores, they close at 7, 8, which I kind of wanted because I wanted to make sure that I had time for myself if I ever wanted to go out on the weekend, which didn't really happen in that fall semester. But I had terrible availability. I was working 12 hours a week with no pay, and I couldn't find a job because of it, and it was super hard. Granted, I did not apply to every job that I saved on Indeed and LinkedIn, and mind you, this was a routine for me. It still is a routine. Going on to LinkedIn, going on to Indeed, saving jobs, applying to jobs, and applying to jobs is so demanding because everyone has to have their own little resume. Maybe you want a cover letter. You have to fill in your hours. It's just such a mess of a process, and I did not like it one bit. But I was told by someone that I was being too picky. It's no, it's not possible that you're not finding a job. You're being too picky. And I agreed to an extent. I was being picky because I didn't want to work just any job that I did not really care for that much. For example, the restaurant business. I told myself a long time ago, I do not ever want to work with food. I hate food. And that was back when I didn't even wash my own dishes. I hated food, working with food, touching food, whatever. I didn't like it. And the restaurant business, I'm sure, is super demanding. I wanted to be a hostess at one point, and I have anxiety. So I think working in that atmosphere, I think I would have handled it well, because I did have to work at like a snack bar for a roller rink once, and it was super demanding there too. And I was taking control of a lot of stuff there in that moment. And so I think I would have been able to handle it, but it definitely would have been a little too much. And it definitely would have brought about a mental breakdown during my shifts. So I definitely was picky with certain jobs. And it all came down to me realizing, like, I don't really want this job. Like, any job that I would come across and I would save, I'd be like, I don't really want this job. I don't really want to work here. I simply do not care for it. I don't have any urge to work here. It's literally just for the paycheck. And I don't want to be miserable while receiving my paycheck, because I already did that. I already did that with my aftercare counselor job. I was receiving the pay, but I hated it. I literally would I would go home super drained. And so I didn't want to repeat that. I didn't want to work somewhere that I just absolutely hated myself. I wanted somewhere that was fun, somewhere that I could enjoy myself, something that I could benefit from. And the options were very limited, I'll tell you that much. So this is what not having a job is like. And everybody has their own experience with it. I'm kind of seeing it more in the sense of what not having a job is like when you're trying to find a job, because I know there are people out there that don't have a job, are not looking for a job, do not care for a job, and they're fine. But I'm talking about my personal experience of not having a job. I am starting to feel more and more inadequate. I'm starting to feel very insecure with my job experience and my career in general. I'm wondering, why am I not qualified for these jobs? Why am I not getting any interviews? Why am I not getting any callbacks? And if you go on like Indeed or LinkedIn, I think it's LinkedIn especially, it'll tell you like how many people already applied to the same position that you are applying for. It's so discouraging, because when it says over 200, I'm like, that's it, I'm out. Like, I don't have a good enough resume as it is, unfortunately. And so it's super discouraging. It's like, how am I ever going to find a job? Am I ever going to find one again? Am I ever going to find a job that will benefit my career? Am I ever going to start building my career? And it starts like overwhelming me to the point where I'm like, I'm not okay with this. I am feeling very small. I'm feeling super unable to do so many things. And maybe some people will either tell you like, you know, you don't need to have all this stuff on your resume most of the times. You just need to make connections. And that's also discouraging for someone that is more on the introverted side and doesn't know many people. It's like, where am I going to get this network from? I don't know how to network. And I know I have to learn, but it's like, where do I even start when people tell you like you have to start making connections? Like, what does that mean? Like, where do I go? Do I just talk to somebody? Like, I can't even go up to somebody to ask them for fucking ketchup packet. That's just a freaking, I don't eat ketchup. That was just a figure of speech. But like, you know what I'm saying? It's hard to talk to people, and it's hard to make connections and everything. And I feel like more and more time passes, it's harder and harder to find a job, because now they're actually telling you, you have to be studying this specific thing to apply for this job. And it's like, damn, well, that sucks, because I can't really change my career position, and I don't know many people, and it's just a whole mess, and it's super, super overwhelming, and I'm feeling very, very inadequate. On top of that, I don't have money to spend freely anymore. Everything in my budget is super, super strict, and maybe that's how it should be, where I have to keep an eye on what I'm spending and what I'm doing with my money, but not in the sense of like, damn, I'm actually having no money come into my bank account. I don't have an income, and that's not fun. It's not fun to manage your expenses when you don't have any money. And so I can't spend it freely anymore. I can't just be like, I'm just going to go treat myself just because to a little cookie at Crumble Cookie or whatever. Cookie Crumble? I don't even remember what it's called anymore. Or if I want to try something new, or I want to go out somewhere, or I want to eat dinner somewhere. It's like I can't go to these expensive places or pricey places. I have to go to the fast food places, or I'm going to have to really limit myself for the rest of the week. And it's very hard to not have that money to spend freely, because if you haven't noticed, the world revolves around money. Very unfortunately, we live in a capitalist society, a capitalist world. And every time you want to do something, it costs money. And not having a job makes me feel insecure of the eyes of other people who have jobs and are able to provide for themselves. I'm currently in college, and I feel like there are so many people that are so much more ahead of me because they have these careers, they have these jobs, they're able to support themselves. I do not support myself financially yet. Unfortunately, I'm still a dependent on my mama's taxes. Okay? I am still a dependent on my mom's taxes. And I remember someone asked me, they were talking about their taxes. They're like, oh, I finally did my taxes. Katie, did you do your taxes? And I was like, my mom does them. I don't know. And I felt so childish. I felt so irresponsible. And so when it comes to people like this that have these jobs, and I'm like, where did you even find that? Like, you guys, you're the same age as me. If anything, you're younger, and you have this like high paying job, and you're still in college, and you have all these connections. Like, how did you do that? How do you have 500 plus connections on LinkedIn? I have two connections on LinkedIn. I think I have 3 now, actually. 3 connections on LinkedIn. It's so hard. And so I also feel like because I don't have a job and I don't have all this responsibility, it's like I'm not allowed to be stressed. And people will be like, well, what are you even stressed about? Like, wait until you have to work like a full-time job, you know? You're only trying to work part-time now. Wait until you have a full-time job and blah, 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 this and that. And it sucks, bro, because regardless if I have a freaking full-time or part-time job, like, I'm going to be exhausted either way. Work is work, you know? And I also had my parents comment on my job experience stuff, and I would get comments like, well, what do you need a job for, is what my parents would say. Like, your job is to study, and that's all you have to focus on right now. And it's like, I get it. I get where they're coming from, and they want to support me and everything, but I want to be financially independent. Just because I'm studying doesn't mean I'm not going to try to work and get my money and be able to provide for myself, you know? And because I don't feel responsible, because I don't feel financially responsible, I don't feel responsible in the sense of like having a job and doing all these things for my career and everything, I don't feel like an adult. I feel like a kid still. And I'm 22, so that's not too young. It's definitely in the younger side of my early 20s, obviously, but I still feel like a kid. And it's a shitty feeling because I want to be an adult. As terrible as it is, as much as we want to go back to being kids and being provided for and everything, at the end of the day, you want to be independent. You want to have your freedom. And that's what I want. And I feel like I'm incapable of getting that right now because I can't find a freaking job. It's ridiculous. And so because of that, I start to worry about my future. As I said, like, how am I going to ever build something out of my career if I can't find a job at the local town center, you know, like the local shopping center? I can't even qualify for this job. So how am I going to build a career? Now that I'm going into the new year with a different school schedule and not an internship, I feel a lot better about my chances of finding a job that I'm able to have time for. Although a lot of places I have noticed that they start asking for 8-hour shifts instead of 4-hour shifts for part-time. And I think that's really strange. I'm not really sure why they do that because I don't think I have time for an 8-hour shift. And on top of that, 8-hour shift is insane. I get that that's full-time, but I'm not full-time, I'm part-time. And you're asking me for an 8-hour shift? That's wild. And so I do think that my chances are better going into the new year, but I definitely still feel limited with my choices and limited as to what I'm able to do. And when I do get back into that workforce and everything, it's going to be very tough and definitely challenging, having to interact with people all the time again and abide by a certain policy and rules. And I do feel limited about what I'm able to do, unfortunately. And when the pandemic happened, I didn't have a job. I had a job, but the store closed down because of the pandemic. And so for a year, I didn't have a job. And I looked for one, but I ended up collecting unemployment instead. And I hated it. I hated having to deal with unemployment. I hated staying inside, not having a job, and doing nothing all day. It sucked. So I already had this experience of like not working for a certain period of time. And that gap makes me kind of worried. I feel like employers look at these long gaps of where I'm not working and they're like, what's this girlie doing? Why isn't she working? It doesn't seem like she wants to work, so I don't think I want to hire her. Like, that's my thought process. That's what I feel like is going on in those people's heads. But I hated that. Unemployment was like the worst experience of my life. I get that I was like earning income in a sense, and it helped, but it just felt super like, I don't even know if it's like I felt like I didn't deserve it, but it just didn't feel as gratifying. Is gratifying a word? Maybe I'm just talking to talk right now, but it felt like not as rewarding as it would have working for the paycheck, you know? And it was just a terrible experience. I didn't like it. But obviously, after not being employed for months now, so let's see, like July is what I usually put on my resume. July, that's 7, 12, 3, 5 months, about 5 months not working. July, August, September, October, November, December. Yeah. 5 months not working, or like 7 months maybe. I'm sorry, I'm getting off track. But having these long gaps without working, obviously my perspective has changed in terms of working and having a job. Disclaimer for my future employers that happen to stumble across this side of my life. Please take everything with a grain of salt. I would like to say that I am a hard worker. When I do have a job, I put my all into it because I tend to be a perfectionist sometimes, and I don't want to seem like I'm not doing the best that I can. So if you do want to hire me, I will do a good job. I promise you that. But my perspective on working has changed in the sense of the longer that I step away from working, the more I can see how much I don't want to work. And that's not a new thought. A lot of people think like, I hate working. I don't want to work. If I could just get the paycheck, then I would just get it. And I understand that. Nobody ever really wants to work. And a lot of people just need it for their bills or their rent or whatever. Like, same, me too, but I think I also need it for my sanity. So as much as I don't want to work, I need to work. I need to work for my sanity, because working can also bring a lot of benefits into your life. Like, your coworkers can become your friends. And as someone that moved into a city and has like very few friends from that city, meeting new people, like, that's what I want to do. I want to meet people. I want to have friends that are my coworkers and go out with them and, you know, network, essentially, make those connections. And working also gives me the opportunity to interact with people. I'm a little hesitant about working retail again because I know how aggressive people can be in the retail world. But for the most part, like, I get to talk to people every day. I get to work on my social skills. It's better than staying in my apartment all day and not talking to anyone for several days. Like, sometimes if I don't have class, I will literally stay in my apartment in my room for the majority of the day. I won't even step outside. I won't even talk to my roommates. It's it's insane to think about that. I go days without talking to anybody, but that's the reality. And so having a job would take me out of my apartment and take me out of my comfort zone, and I can actually see the world and experience the world and the people in it. As grueling as work can be, it can also be very beneficial. And I need that for my sanity, because I feel myself slowly going insane, not having a job, not talking to anybody, not knowing anybody. And it's a lot to deal with. And on top of that, again, having the money to spend freely. I touched this on my last episode, where everything costs money, everything to do and to explore and exploring your interests, that all costs money. Any hobby that you want to do, pretty much you have to invest money into it. Not having the money to spend as freely is also driving me insane, because I can't really put any time or effort or money into what I want to pursue. And I guess that begs the question of, like, does anyone really want to work, like, ever? Like, does anyone actually want to go into their job and work? And I think there's two sides of that. I think in terms of working, there are the people that are working to pay the bills. Like, they are working paycheck to paycheck because they have to. They have to pay the bills. They have to pay their rent. They have to pay their food. They have to pay the necessities and insurance and everything else. It's definitely not something that they're choosing to do. It's something they have to. On the other hand, there's the people that are working for something that they love and are passionate about. They are doing their job with so much love and happiness and willingness to do it. I'm sure, like, you guys have come across people that are working probably the most mundane jobs. They could be working in a food truck or as a server or retail or whatever, but they genuinely love their job, and you can sense that. Like, they make you feel so much better coming into their place of work, and it just feels so much better. So props to those people. I'm sure they love their jobs, and when you love your job and you're passionate about what you're doing, like, obviously it's so much easier to go into that every single day. But regardless, work is work. It's a service, and you're putting time, effort, and energy into something. You're putting all of this time, effort, and energy into the work that you're doing. So regardless if you love your job and you're passionate about it, at some point it's going to become draining. It's going to take a lot out of you to be doing the same thing all the time, or to be doing the same job all the time, even if it's not the same routine. And you become burnt out by doing something that, even if you love it, you do a ton of it and you get burnt out. And so that's where the balance comes in, is that you need time away from your job. Even if you love it, you need time away from working, which is where those vacation days come in, where you can request days off, and it's like, okay, I'm going on vacation and I'm going to step away and everything. But let me tell you, I'm sure everybody goes on vacation and thinks, I don't want to leave. I want to stay on vacation forever. I wish I didn't have to go back into work. But speaking from personal experience, sitting around and doing nothing all day is so exhausting. It's different in the exhausting sense of, like, going into work after an 8-hour shift and then coming back home and you're exhausted. That's physically exhausted. I think doing nothing all day is exhausting mentally. I hate sitting inside, even though, like, I'm very introverted and I will do that most of the time, sit in my room and just be by myself. It's exhausting sitting inside doing nothing and having no purpose and not having anything to do, no responsibility. And having a job can introduce me to friends. It gets me out of the apartment. It forces me to interact with people. Whereas I'm sitting inside and I feel like I'm doing nothing to fulfill those parts of my life, to fill my cup in the sense of, like, my social life. Unfortunately, there are negative sides to this as well, because, you interact with people, you will get drama into your life. When I worked in that retail store, I loved it. I loved being there. I felt very welcomed. There were times where it was very repetitive and boring, and I was like, maybe I should find a different job. But for the most part, I like the people working there. But there was some people that had some drama. They brought their drama in. I got involved in there somehow, even though it had nothing to do with me. And I think that's a lesson for everyone to know that drama is going to come into the workplace one way or another, unfortunately, because we're human beings. We have opposing opinions and ways of doing things that might not always sit well with everyone. And so that's just kind of how it is, unfortunately. So there's definitely negative sides to working, but overall, I think it could be very beneficial for your social life and for your sanity, speaking from personal experience, but the drama is definitely one of the downsides. And so I would say overall, working can be all of those negative things. It can be grueling. It can be exhausting. It can be so much from time to time. But working is also very necessary. Not in the sense of like you need it to live, but you need it for your sanity. You need it to fulfill different parts of your life that you might not think. And so when I'm thinking about my work in the future, I never imagined myself to be someone that does the same thing every day for my job. I could never imagine myself working a desk job where I'm just going to work, sitting at a desk, 9 to 5, go back home and do the same thing the next day. I can't imagine my life like that. And that's fine for some people. I know there's people that do that and they love their job. They're content with their job. But I personally could never imagine myself doing that. I don't want to do that. And so right now I am more motivated to find temporary jobs. Not like having my job for like a super short time, but like building a ladder and climbing it, you know, working my way up. Like, okay, I'm going to do this job and it's going to lead me to another job. And then I'm going to have this job for a certain amount of time and then it's going to lead me to another job and another job. And I'm thinking about this in terms of like my career. Like, I don't think I'm just going to find a job and do that for the rest of my life. I definitely think I want to move from place to place. And another thought I had was that I always thought that I had so many jobs that I actually wanted to do that, you know, a lot of people just want to work one career, but I wanted to do multiple things. Like this really weird job goal or job that I really wanted was I wanted to work on a cruise ship for some reason. And that seems like a career, like that's something that you do for a certain amount of time, like, or for like a good amount of your life. But I just wanted to do it for just the experience, just that one time, and then on to something else. And I also wanted to work with like marine animals for some reason. I was like, damn, I should have majored in biology and it would have been really hard, but I would have loved to work at an aquarium or something. And so there's these little like jobs that I just wanted to do, and I just imagined myself going from one place to another. And that's what I mean by having like temporary jobs. Like, not saying like I'm going to be here for 2 months and then 3 months and blah, blah, blah. Like, no, I can see myself for like a year or something and then on to the next. You know, it's all about like building myself up and going up the ladder instead of just staying stagnant in one place. And I'm also starting to be open to remote jobs. I've been applying to remote internships that are paid so that I actually get pay for the time that I put in. And I never really considered remote jobs. And the thing about remote jobs that kind of goes against what I was saying before about like the social life and everything is that I'm afraid that if I get a remote job, then I'm not going to interact with people. And that kind of defeats the whole purpose of like, I need it for my sanity. But I think with remote jobs, there's so much more freedom to do anything. Like I know people that have remote jobs that are like, I'm going to go catch this flight to the next city and I'm still on the clock. So we're going to see how that works. And that just seems so much fun. And so I feel like remote jobs, especially in this day and age, after the pandemic and everything, it's something that a lot more people are open to and realizing like we can just do this. We don't have to clock into work. We don't have to make that commute and everything. And I think it's exciting. And I think it's something to definitely look into, for me at least. And so also during this break of not working, I have considered working for myself. Now, I never felt capable enough to have my own business and to be my own boss. Like, I never thought of myself to be like, I'm going to open a company and I'm going to work for myself and I'm going to build myself up and everything. No, girl, like I always thought of myself as a worker. I work for someone else. I'm an employee. But then it's like, why not? Why don't I think that I'm capable of that? Because if somebody else can do it, I can do it too. I'm also capable of that. It's definitely going to be a lot of work and it's not going to be easy, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. It's not impossible. If it was impossible, then no one would do it, you know? And especially when I'm doing this podcast, hopefully this turns into something that I'm able to use for my career and I can be my own boss in some form or fashion. That would be really cool. But I don't think I want to spend the rest of my life working for someone else. I will do that for a majority of my life probably, but I think eventually like my goal would be to like be my own boss and do my own thing, because sometimes when you do work for someone else, there are those constraints that really make the job not as fun as it used to be, because you might think you're doing it a certain way that fits better for you, but you have to follow a certain policy that everybody else wants you to do. And so it's not as fun and it's not as beneficial to you to explore what you want to do. So when you are your own boss, you can just do whatever you feel is best for you. Of course, take advice from everyone around you, because you're not like top dog either, you know. Even if you're on top, you're not going to be someone that knows everything and you need those second opinions. But I don't think I want to spend the rest of my life working for someone. I want to have that freedom, and that's not for everyone. I actually saw this TikTok the other day from Danny from the Cimarelli sisters. She's married now, so that's not her last name, but her name's Danny. And she was talking about how I love my 9 to 5. I don't know about y'all, but I love clocking out on Friday on 5 p.m. and not even having to think about my job for the next 2 days. And a lot of people were agreeing with her. And I never really considered that, because I know there's a lot of people that don't like the 9 to 5 and wish they had more freedom, everything. But now these people are like, I'm fine with the 9 to 5. I'm fine being an employee, because what Danny was talking about was when you are your own boss, you have to think about your job 24/7. When you're off the clock, you have to do that all the time. Whereas you're an employee, once the clock hits 5 p.m., I'm out. I don't have to think about my job. I don't have to worry about it. And so it's a different dynamic, and it's definitely based on personal preference, what you want to do, whether you want to have that freedom and put a lot more work into it, or you just want to be like leisurely working and have your freedom on the weekends and, you know, just have this regular routine, something that's maybe not as freeing, but something that's more comfortable. And I totally understand that. But I think eventually being my own boss will give me more freedom, and therefore it will give me more happiness on top of that. And again, like I said, it's a lot of work, and I'm repeating myself. It's so much work, but that's what goes into having all of that freedom that you can have. And eventually when I do start working again, maybe my opinion will change and I'll be like, I don't like this at all. I just don't want to work at all. But right now, currently not having a job and trying to look for one and everything, I definitely see things a little differently, especially coming closer to trying to build my career once I graduate college and everything. All I hope is that I can do something that is fulfilling for me, because we do work for most of our lives. And there can be negative sides to it, but there can also be a lot of positive sides to it. And I am very prepared to start my positive side of the work experience. And it's not impossible for me to want to say that I want to be my own boss one day. And maybe one day it will happen. And that's all based on the work that I am willing to put in. Well, all right. That was today's episode, and hopefully it worked out well, because I had to hold onto the microphone the whole time, and definitely a janky setup, but I hope I was able to express these thoughts clear enough in a way that's not confusing and doesn't sound overbearing. I just thought it was important for me to talk about this before I actually did end up finding a job, because then my opinion will definitely change. But anyways, hope you liked the episode. If you can relate in any form or fashion about working and jobs, it's definitely a tough world out there, but we're going to get through it. So if you like the pod, be sure to follow on the socials. The podcast technically only has one official social on Instagram. It's at SOLITA pod. But I also have my own personal accounts that you can also follow. So we have my personal Instagram, _Katie Torres. That's _KATHIETORRES. And then my Twitter and TikTok are both at Y2Katie. That's Y2KATHIE. And these will all be in the show description, episode description. You know where to find it. You know where to look. But yeah, I hope you have a great rest of your day. And I hope that I can find a job by the time that I release this episode. So, thanks for listening. Goodbye.